Big news for the Las Vegas Raiders. General Manager John Spytek was recently spotted at Boise State's Pro Day, closely watching running back Ashton Jeanty. This raises a big question. Could the Raiders be planning to take Jeanty with the 6th overall pick? Now, some might hesitate about drafting a running back so early, but Jeanty is no ordinary player. If you want a generational talent like Saquon Barkley or Adrian Peterson, you have to pick them early. And let me tell you, Jeanty has that kind of potential. Watching him at Pro Day was eye-opening. His speed, footwork, and explosiveness were on another level. And it's not just about that one workout. His game tape proves he's the real deal. Players like this don't come around often, and the Raiders seem to know it. Here's where things get even more interesting. After his Pro Day, the Raiders didn't just watch him, they took him out to dinner. That's a big sign. Teams don't do that unless they're seriously interested. And think about it. How many other teams wanted to meet with Jeanty? How many did he turn down just to sit with the Raiders? Before we dive deeper into this exciting possibility, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and hit the bell icon so you never miss the latest Raiders updates. Now, back to Jeanty. The Raiders aren't just scouting him. They could be locking in on their next star. Yes, Boise State has another solid prospect, Ahmad Hussein, a defensive player with impressive sack numbers, but make no mistake, the real focus here is Jeanty. If the Raiders are this invested, don't be surprised if they make a bold move in the draft. Stay tuned because things are heating up for the Silver and Black. Ashton Jeanty isn't the only player the Raiders might have been scouting at Boise State, but let's be real. He's the one that matters most. Yes, there are other solid prospects, but none stand out the way Jeanty does. And here's the key detail. Raiders general manager John Spytek himself was there watching him. That's a big deal. Teams don't send their GM to a pro day just for fun. Scouts? Sure. But when the top decision-maker is present, it means serious interest. And let's not forget, Ohio State had its pro day at the same time, and the Raiders skipped it. That tells you exactly where their priorities are. Now, the question is, should the Raiders draft Jeanty? Some hesitate about taking a running back early, but here's the reality. If you're not going to pay big money for a veteran, you need to draft a game-changer. Last season, the Raiders struggled after moving on from Josh Jacobs without a solid plan. Zamir White stepped in, but let's be honest, it wasn't the best situation. The team lacked a true difference-maker at running back, and it showed. Spytek has a history of drafting running backs, and this time, he seems determined to get it right. If the Raiders are serious about building a strong offense, Jeanty could be the missing piece. He's explosive, talented, and exactly the kind of player who can change a game. And with the way things are shaping up, don't be surprised if he's wearing silver and black next season. The Raiders know they need firepower on offense, and Ashton Jeanty could be a major part of that plan. He's electric, explosive, and has the potential to be a game-changer. But here's the big question. Should the Raiders prioritize a running back over other key positions? It's a tough call. Running backs don't have the longest careers, and history shows that offensive tackles and elite wide receivers tend to have a bigger long-term impact. Imagine passing on a top-tier tackle who could anchor the offensive line for over a decade, only to see your running back slow down after 6 or 7 seasons. That's the dilemma. However, if Jeanty turns out to be one of the best backs in the NFL, it could be worth it. The key is making sure the offensive line is solid. Without strong blocking, even the best running back will struggle. The Raiders seem to understand this, which is why they're also looking at top offensive line prospects. One name to watch is Will Campbell. The LSU lineman has confirmed a visit with the Raiders this week, which shows the team is serious about strengthening the trenches. Some have questioned whether he's better suited for guard than tackle, but that versatility could actually be a major advantage. The Raiders have a history of moving college tackles inside, and if Campbell fits that mold, he could be a perfect addition to the lineup. John Spytek skipped LSU's Pro Day to focus on Jeanty, but that doesn't mean the Raiders aren't thinking about the offensive line. They know a dominant O-line is just as important as a dynamic playmaker. Whether it's Jeanty or Campbell or both, the Raiders are making moves to build a strong, balanced team. The Raiders have a tough decision to make when it comes to the offensive line. Will Campbell is one of the most talked-about prospects, but is he worth a top draft pick? That's where things get tricky. Campbell played left tackle in college, but there are serious doubts about whether he can do the same in the NFL. His arm length is a concern. Against elite pass rushers, shorter arms make it harder to keep defenders away. In college, he faced top-tier defensive ends maybe twice a season. In the NFL, he'd be up against monsters every single week. That's a whole different challenge. Now, here's the real debate. If the Raiders take Campbell with the 6th overall pick as a guard, that would be a disaster. You don't use a premium pick on an interior lineman unless he's a generational talent. But if Campbell slides to the 2nd round, that's a different story. At that point, he'd be an absolute steal. The draft is unpredictable. Every year, so-called top 5 locks fall way lower than expected. Remember Malik Willis? Some thought he'd be a top 5 pick, and he dropped deep into the draft. Will Levis had a similar story. Even highly rated tackles have slipped much further than expected. So, while some might project Campbell as a top 5 guy, NFL teams might see him differently, especially if they view him as a guard rather than a tackle. The Raiders need to be smart. If they want Campbell to anchor the offensive line, they have to be sure he can actually play tackle at a high level. If they see him as a guard, they need to wait for the right moment. Wasting a top pick on a player at the wrong position could set them back. But if they get it right, this could be a move that strengthens the line for years to come. The Raiders have a lot of options in this draft, but one big question remains. What's their real plan? Well, Campbell is on their radar, but is he worth the 6th overall pick? No way. If they can get him in the 2nd round or trade back and grab him later, that's a different story. A trade could be the smartest move. Teams like Pittsburgh or Miami might be desperate to move up for a quarterback. And if the Raiders can slide back and still get value, that's a win. But let's talk about something even more intriguing. Deion Sanders recently made a comment that has everyone talking. He was discussing his son, Shedeur Sanders, and the teams that have shown interest in him. He mentioned New York, Cleveland, Tennessee, and, here's the interesting part, he said, "If it's still the Raiders." What does that mean? Still the Raiders? That little word makes it sound like at some point, the Raiders were strongly considering drafting Shedeur Sanders. Did someone from the organization tell Deion that his son was in their plans? Did something change? Or are they playing mind games with other teams? It's also worth noting that the Raiders have been busy scouting Boise State's Pro Day, possibly looking at running back Ashton Jeanty. But could this be a smokescreen? Maybe the Raiders want another team to jump ahead and grab Jeanty, allowing them to trade back and get Shedeur Sanders instead. Something is definitely brewing behind the scenes. Whether it's Shedeur, an offensive lineman, or another surprise pick, the Raiders seem to be setting up a big move. One thing's for sure, this draft is going to be a wild one for the Silver and Black. The NFL draft is full of surprises, and one name that has everyone talking is Shedeur Sanders. Just a few months ago, he was being discussed as a potential top 2 pick. Now, his stock is plummeting. The reason? A series of questionable decisions that have raised serious concerns among teams, including the Raiders. Sanders skipped the Senior Bowl, a prime opportunity to prove himself. Then, he refused to throw at the NFL Combine. If that wasn't enough, he even skipped throwing at his own pro day. For scouts and front offices, this sends a clear message. Is he uninterested? Does he think he's already proven himself? Or is there something else going on? Rumors are swirling that his attitude has rubbed some teams the wrong way. Some insiders believe he carries a celebrity mindset, acting like he doesn't need to prove anything. That's a huge red flag in the NFL, where teams want leaders who are ready to grind, not just live off hype. But the real question is, are the Raiders still interested? Deion Sanders' recent comments hinted that the team was in the mix. But was that before these concerns surfaced? Have they moved on to another quarterback target? The Raiders are known for making bold moves, but taking a chance on a player with question marks could be risky. At the end of the day, this draft is shaping up to be unpredictable for Las Vegas. Whether they go for a quarterback, trade down, or make a surprise pick, one thing is clear: the silver and black are playing this one close to the chest.